Hi, it's Ed, and I welcome you to Global TV Talk Show again. I want to introduce our sponsors. Global TV Talk Show is co-sponsored by Porchlight Rental and Destination Services. That's porchlightrental.com, porchlightrental.com. Also by cubemonk.com. That's cubemonk.com. It's an innovation in also good packaging, freight forwarding, wonderful invention. And by the relocation management company, AIRS Relocation. That's AIRES, airs.com. Thank you for being a sponsor of Global TV Talk Show. Hi, this is Ed Cohen coming to you today from San Diego, California. This is Global TV Talk Show. It's a conference, but it's virtual. Of course, this is how we're doing it these days. So we have special guests today from different places. First of all, Andrew Bruzzi. I think all of you know Andrew. Says welcome. And Jorge Rodriguez, who's involved with Vendium Global, and Al Dennis, who's an executive with the Gold Coucher, and Olivia.
Excited to be here.
Olivia, please introduce yourself and your company.
Sure. So my name is Olivia Bahrami. I'm the founder and CEO of Prime Communications. It's the only global mobility communications firm that exists. So I work with RMCs and service providers worldwide, and I help them with all of their communications projects. So things like RFPs, sales proposals, website copy, any kind of marketing and communications function. That's my specialty. And I've been doing that for the past 10 years. And I absolutely love what I do, and I enjoy it. So I'm glad to be here.
Great. Thank you. This is your first time on our show, and I welcome you. And I want to introduce Mark Colo, who's Vice President Sales with Chipman Relocation and Logistics in the Western U.S. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you.
So this is a talk show that's an idea exchange. We do have a featured guest, Andrew Bruzzi, who's going to be talking with us about technology and mobility, and particularly with a look, if you will, a look into VR and AR and whatever all that means.
Mm-hmm.
And how do we get our hands around that? How do we get our minds around this? So, Andrew, tell us about yourself, and also please tell us about the STAR Coalition.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. First, again, I lead an organization called Vendium Global, which is an HR consultancy firm that is based in Northwest Arkansas. So what we do is we help organizations try to achieve what we refer to as an augmented workforce, essentially incorporating in processes and technology to work alongside humans, specific in HR and global mobility, where they can use things like conversational AI or some technologies like you're talking about of the VR and AR. And the STAR Coalition is something that we started, maybe, I don't even know how old it is right now, maybe a year and a half ago. So it was to pull together so it stands for the Southern Talent Acquisition and Relocation Coalition. So to pull together all of the local professionals in the mobility space, talent acquisition, recognizing that there's a synergy between the two. And there's also a break that occurs in a lot of cases where talent acquisition hands over to relocation. And during that time, that's when it's I thought I was going to get $1 million in the Lamborghini. And as soon as it hands over to Relo, and the talent acquisition can think that everything was perfect and then hand off to Relo and they have a bad experience. So it's how to share information with each other, how to synergize with each other, and how to make sure that we are all effectively supporting as we can for lean and effective workforces.
Okay, that's really cool. So before all this, you were a corporate guy.
Yes, sir. So I led the mobility program with Walmart for a little bit over 5 years. So when Olivia mentioned that she's the only Canadian on the call, I did do an expat assignment up at the Mississauga office, and actually just through conversations, found out I was right up the street from her, but I had no idea who she was. So
That's actually very true. Yeah. So I actually used to work, just a little side in here. I used to work for VMI Group, as some of you may know, has been acquired by Wycard Workforce Mobility. And the Walmart head office is actually only 10 minutes away from VMI Group's old office. So fun fact.
That's great. Dennis, tell us about what's going on now with Go Culture. It's a brand new initiative just starting, right?
Absolutely. It's extremely exciting what's going on with Go Culture. Basically, Go Culture has been able to quantify improvement and to be able to benchmark specifically diversity, equity, and inclusion. So it's backed by data. We've got some really, really good nerds involved. I'm not the biggest nerd, but we're looking at 93% validity versus the industry standard of 43% when it comes to actually impacting an organization or an individual within an organization's ability to interact with another individual, and coming together, actually being able to quantify, measure that. It's revolutionary, and it's shall I say, it's COVID ready as well. And so it's something we're really excited about bringing to not just military or academia, but heavily the private sector in America.
Well, it's really interesting. I just want to say also that on July 29, Global TV is going to produce a program dedicated to diversity and inclusion, belonging. And I'll get you that info. Perhaps you'd want to jump into that.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, Andrew. I've never had a set of VR and AR. I've had a lot of trouble even dealing with Zoom for a while. So what is AR and VR, and how's it going to relate to mobility?
Sure. So I have an article that I'm going to be putting out. I probably shouldn't say this as we're live, but hopefully today. So I'd say that I shouldn't just hold myself accountable, but it's actually talking about what the future of mobility and kind of the future of HR is going to look like. And part of that is through AR and VR. So virtual reality differs from augmented reality because what it is you are in an ecosystem that is closed. Augmented reality is where you'll have a digital image or hologram or something like that that will interact with your daily life. So as you're walking through the streets of a city, for instance, it can give you directions. It can tell you where something is. It can tell you where your temporary accommodations are. There's also something that gets conflated in those two that we often use that is essentially VR, but it's known as spherical 360 video. And that's used a lot now with area tours and things like property tours, school tours, because what you can do is you can take your phone. You may have seen these in like a Walmart or a Target, and you're able to insert the phone into a headset. This will then give you the sense that you can look all the way around in a certain area. And so that's highly effective, especially when we are quarantined, when we do have limitations in moving, that we can't travel as much. And everyone has a phone. The headsets can be as cheap as $50. So a lot of our clients are using that now as a solution.
So how should this be used in mobility management?
Yes, good question. So there's a number of different ways. I have a bad habit of getting very Star Trekky and like thinking of Jorge knows this. There was once a conference that I went to. It actually was Worldwide ERC, and I was like, you know what? It would be really cool if we could talk to our bots. And we're like, oh yeah, that would probably take like 3 months. Let's get that done. And within the week when I got back, Jorge and the team were able to get that up and running within the week. So when I say that I like to get Star Trekky, it's because of VR has the potential and actually the practical current use of being a enclosed training environment. So actually Walmart uses it as a training tool in stores that they have as training facilities. They refer to them as academies, where you can interact with a customer in a tense situation. Obviously, that's a very low stakes game because you're in a VR environment. So for mobility purposes, you can use it for things like intercultural training, touring a certain area. You can go take so virtual global assignments are a big thing right now. For augmented reality, that is a lot more of something in science fiction movies, which again, I happen to be a nerd, so I love this stuff. I love the concept and the potential to be able to sit around a conference room table and see people that are sitting at the chairs but aren't actually there. That's a form of augmented reality, and that's something that we actually can use right now. So Microsoft has a product. There's a number of different companies that have products that can functionally do that, or just have a hologram walking around with you. So it's no longer the stuff of science fiction. So we like to use those things for mobility purposes, like, again, training, information delivery, area tours, school tours, and helping to educate the workforce, because ultimately mobility shares and transports ideas. So how do we do that more effectively? And the easy answer is through technology.
So let me ask you a question about this visual idea, and this is injected to lighten up a little bit here. But with all the sports events coming on and with empty stadiums, is it possible to virtualize an audience in the stands so the players can feel like they're playing to somebody?
I was actually just thinking the opposite of whether or not you could virtualize the sports team. And you can theoretically do both. It would be pretty expensive to have holograms for each one of those, for each individual. But I know that I used to play a lot of sports, and having a audience always makes you perform better, because then you have someone to not look, terrible for. So
Accountability.
Yeah, coming from the boxer with Al.
Right. Okay, so do you and Jorge have a bot or more than one bot in your offices?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we use they're generally always custom built. I actually have had a number of folks that ask to see, like, hey, can we like play around with one, or what do your bots do? And realistically, it's anything that you could process map, you can have a bot do it. So there's two different things. A chat bot differs from robotic process automation, because robotic process automation most typically does not have any human interaction. A chat bot has the ability for a live human handoff. So a great example where we have some folks on our team that will support any of our RMC clients that use our bots, where if they're getting a query that the bot doesn't know the answer to, then it can push over to a human and immediately have them pick it up. And then in the same interface, you're just talking to a human now. So
Interesting.
Yeah, and the perks of the conversation is any customer service role, essentially, you can have it done with a bot. I often joke that anytime that you've had a bad experience where a bot can't answer a question, that is a design.
Yeah. So Olivia, do you happen to have a robot in your office?
I don't. I'm a one woman operation right now, so I do everything myself. But maybe one day I will. I'm actually getting some good traction with some good opportunities coming up soon. So I may actually have to leverage one of Andrew's bots soon.
and we have been kicking around the idea of how to incorporate artificial intelligence into RFP tools. So
yes, yeah. That's kind of what we're toying with right now. We don't know what that would look like, but I think the RFP process would benefit greatly from some technology. Absolutely. Because having one person doing everything is just not an efficient way of doing things. And we could be spending more time being more strategic in our responses, which usually helps to drive the prospect, from a prospect to a client, or through the presentation stage, which I often help with for my RMC clients. So some of my clients actually have RFP tools that they use to integrate the RFP process with, but unfortunately it's not sufficient. So we have to think of creative, innovative ways to leverage technology in a more efficient way to just be more strategic.
Mark Colo, in the moving storage business, you deal with doctors and research laboratories, moving sensitive equipment, and of course people. Are you using robots?
Not yet, Ed. I can see it coming in the future, though. We could use it sparingly and cautiously in the residence if you're moving household goods. You're allowed.
Yeah.
You've got a little more flexibility.
Yeah. So Mark is, just so you know, he's involved in a charity, as I alluded to earlier, called findcures.org, which is 5013C. But and they're going to have a big golf tournament in Southern California, charity golf tournament as a fundraiser, and that's assuming everyone plays golf or will practice safe distance, and I guess that's possible, right? On a golf course, but not on a golf cart.
It's actually probably one of the safest things you can do outdoors. As long as you know the person you're with, you're only really side by side with one other person. So, and then if you have the food outside, which we're planning to have that outdoors, we can spread people around and kind of keep people apart. So,
yeah. So this is not a commercial, but it is for all of our businesses, and we all need the help these days. And I'm a very commercial guy, and so it's very okay to talk about your business. And so Mark was stricken with Parkinson's some years ago, and has been very, very smart to be involved with the disease from an educational point of view, and has co-founded this charity, and has used the occasion very smartly, and not to embarrass you at all, Mark, but just to add info and depth here. He's dealing with doctors and researchers who did not know that Mark has had this affliction. And he's helped research scientists relocate brain tissue and really, really precious materials across the world, across the country. Why don't you just talk a little bit about that with the University of California in particular?
Yeah, it's been interesting. In our industry, there's always new segments that grow and come up. And I started out with household goods primarily, then I went into commercial moving, and now I spend most of my time working with universities to relocate these scientists who are going to be the next individuals that find cures for these various neurological diseases. So I'm really excited to be in that niche. I keep quite busy getting contacted to move laboratories and homes and everything associated with the research that goes on with that type of business. It's been great. I've often said that, that things that happen in life are not always coincidence or lucky. If the odds are so astronomical as it has been with me in this niche I've fallen into, it's a little bit beyond just luck. I mean, I feel like there's someone watching over me that's kind of helping me along in all this process. But I probably moved in the last 4 years. I moved about 85 research scientists. And I get just about one a week now that calls me and says, "Hey, Mark, here you do lab moves. I'm moving my lab from Florida to California." And so I get to get involved with all the segments involved with that. Part of it is biospecimens. These freezers have biospecimens that, if you think about it, it's the scientist's life's work. It's been his whole career is dealing with these biospecimens and trying to find the cure. So if the temperature raises or decreases by more than 3 degrees within any given trailer, it could compromise the samples, and that scientist's life work. So it's been kind of interesting.
That's incredibly impressive. I've worked in mobility for a long time. I've moved endangered animals and very weird items, but never a lab. That you're making me nerd out on that. That's so cool.
Well, it's complicated, and of course, each scientist says, "Mark, can you guarantee that my specimens will get there in the same shape as when they leave my laboratory?" And when they're going coast to coast, that's a tall order to say, "Oh yeah, no problem, we'll take care of it." But somehow we get it done, and the third parties I work with are excellent. And they do their job quite well. So
yeah, good. Thank you for sharing that. So I want to ask Paul, is it okay to run that?
It certainly is. Here we go.
Okay, stand by. This is a commercial for Mark's company. I show it to you because it's super cool and it's aimed at the new generations.
Managing your FF&D supply chain poses a big challenge, as in this big. From beginning to end, supply chains involve so many vendors to manage and hold accountable, unless you choose Chipman. With Chipman, you have a single vendor you can trust from order to installation. We manage the freight's journey from shipping point forward, and you can track your product at any given time. With company-owned warehouses across the West Coast and service centers throughout the nation, Shipman offers the same excellence to you, regardless of where you do business. We receive, inspect, and inventory your product according to your purchase order. Our robust web-based warehouse management software makes it easy to view your inventory in our warehouses. Because Chipman is an asset-based logistics company, we have the resources to deliver your product on schedule and to respond to expedited requests. We can even go the final mile with full FF&D and OS&D installation services. We work to ensure your project finishes on time and on budget. We've built a single source solution for our customers, offering freight management, warehousing, delivery, installation, and project management. Make Chipman your logistics partner on your next hospitality project.
Good. Thank you, Paul. Paul, I'd like you to run in just a couple of minutes one of the commercials. It could be the one with the green grass, if that's handy for you. But before we do that, Andrew, you just saw that video, which, it's super cool, the way they use the graphics. How would you use VR or AR to augment that?
Oh gosh, now you like. All right, everyone get a drink, and we're gonna have a long conversation. Tell everyone it's gonna extend a few hours. Jorge, what are you drinking? But
This is Aqua.
Yeah, right. So part of that is and actually this is a really cool thing that I'll give a bit of a shout out to both Al and Jorge in this, is that so the purpose of VR or AR is to help you interact as humans do. We're used to communicating face to face. This is actually why right now we can all see each other, and it's a lot more impactful. That is actually something strange. That is where, Ed, you and I have actually never met in person, but
I know
we've had so many conversations virtually that I feel like we're old friends. And actually, even likewise with Olivia, that's so weird to think about, and Al as well. So out of all of that, that we are conditioned as human beings to view people and see them and read the body language, where even a lot of things in communication, they say that it could be up as much as 80% of all communication is nonverbal. So the purpose of VR or AR is to give you that same experience. So it would be something like being in a commercial, but actually being in a commercial. There was a friend of mine that recommended, actually, one of my first VR experiences. Outside of I grew up in the 90s, so the very old version of it where everything's all blocky. But there's a video game that no one could get past the first level on. And I don't play very many video games, but I thought that was fascinating. It was a Resident Evil VR video game on the PlayStation. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's a game. Obviously, I'm going to play this. This is going to be the easiest thing in the world. Like, nothing can hurt me. But as soon as you are immersed with sound and visuals, our brain is convinced that we are there. So similar to how right now we're having a face-to-face conversation, even though that would be very strange to have everyone's faces that close together while we're looking at them between, a 17-inch screen. It tricks our brain into thinking that we're actually having a face-to-face conversation, that we are communicating as humans like to communicate. So anything from conversation AI to VR to any type of AI, actually, or virtual environment, it's purpose built to have you simulate real life in a very believable way, where there's something even called a Turing test, where you can't determine whether or not you're communicating with a via or with a VR with an AI or a human, and that has already been passed. That we actually have bots that you can talk to verbally, that you're scratching your head of whether or not it's a human, because it has the inflections that we have. We all have accents. So Ed, you grew up in Boston. Al grew up in New York. Jorge grew up all over the world. Olivia grew up in Canada, and so on. So like all of those pieces, we are accustomed, and our ear is tuned into hearing those dialects. And even when we're traveling outside of the U.S. and we hear someone speaking English, we'll immediately gravitate to them. But when I mentioned the shout out to Al there, it's that with the Go Culture product, I originally started with linked with Go Culture to be a client of theirs, because it was so cool that they have videos that are so captivating that it teaches you how you learn best. And when you're watching it, you become part of it. It's like we've all watched a movie where you are sitting there and like your heart starts going, you start sweating, you start getting nervous, and that is because it's that effective it's that effective of a form of communication.
Interesting. So, Olivia, you're a communication specialist. So,
Yes.
Does that mean PR?
No, actually, I don't do any PR. I specialize more on the corporate side of things. So, as I mentioned, request for proposal. So, I manage the entire RFP lifecycle process. I also help my clients with white papers, case studies, any kind of marketing materials that they want to put out to their prospects or clients, or even on social media. That's something that I assist them with. So, sometimes you'll see various posts from certain RMCs. Obviously, I can't disclose who I work with for confidentiality reasons, but some of those posts are actually written by me. Some of their blog posts, some of their white papers. I'm actually working on a white paper right now for one of my RMC clients that'll be coming out soon. That's kind of the work that I do.
Okay, that's great. Paul, are you ready to show the world your latest creation?
Olivia.
Okay, watch this. All right, thank you very much. All right, so this is Paul's the creative genius. These are some of our co-sponsors. We're always looking for co-sponsors. So we're going to be filling that up. We'll be producing 100 broadcasts between now and New Year's, and which is about 4 a week. If we keep up that pace and still breathe.
You say that so casually, like about 4 weeks.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, well, but the answer is to have type A personality, so I don't have to do all the work. Right? I mean, just look at this group here. You're all A type, right? Okay, so I'm wearing a shirt here. This is the U.S. This is the border that's still closed up here, right?
Okay.
You can't. I can't go to Canada, and they can't come here. So
hopefully next year.
Yeah.
I don't think it's happening this year, but next year for sure. Let's hope.
Right.
So we'll be doing this virtual talk show August 6th, as I mentioned. And Marilla Marin, who's now with Zynga, is going to be one of our featured guests. And also, just so you know, Stephen Krein is going to be joining our show. And so, Olivia, I welcome you. And I've got a couple of others that will be announced soon. It'll be mostly about Canada and business there, and including, I'm sorry, my scratchy eye here. So I welcome any guidance or suggestions so we can make this a great show. So let's move on here. Al, who are your most prolific clients at the current time? In other words, by asking that question, this is unrehearsed, obviously. Who is buying into this product that you have?
That's a great question. I think the best way to answer that is giving you my background. I worked for the Hershey Company for approximately 9 years, spent another 4 or 5 years with Liberty Mutual. Working within those organizations, I saw two things. I saw millions of dollars lost based on professional tribalism, based on lack of awareness, things of that nature. At the same time, I saw hundreds of thousands of dollars spent and close to $1 million spent on diversity training initiatives. I actually put together the first diversity training initiative in the history of the Hershey Company, and with help, obviously. So that was fine and dandy. The problem with that is there's three things. There's no accountability. No matter how effective the training, the administration of the training, diversity training was, there's no way to measure it. There's no way to hold the employees accountable. There's no sustainability. So once I was gone, what was there to incentivize the employees to continue to act upon those things that they learned and that they, by a survey, consider positive? Well, Goal Culture now has the ability to quantify that. So, Goal Culture holds each employee accountable. It is something that is very, very seamless. At the same time, it's measurable. You can become benchmarked from an employee standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, can be leveraged marketing wise. And at the same time, most importantly, it's backed again by data, raw. It's 93% proven effective when the industry average is 43%. So that's where I and to be candid with you and not to be too fluffy, I truly believe that any organization of any size can benefit.
So let me ask you a couple of questions just about the whole strategy,
Sure.
Strategy and tactics. Is there such a thing as rewarding employees to get into this idea of self-discovery? Like for instance, me, do I have unconscious bias? Would people have an unconscious bias or conscious bias against me because of my last name?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have a goatee or what? So how do you train people? How do you keep it friendly?
Well, I think that inherently the user becomes more and more excited about it as they dive into, say, for example, the initial questionnaire, and they're assessed, and then they can look at where they are and see where they go. But to specifically answer your question, most organizations that I've worked for or consulted with have programs already in place, whether it be sexual harassment training, whether it be diversity training. They're linked to a respective LMS or a system that these employees are required to complete. So these employees it's something that they're forced to do, and so they may not receive vacation if they don't complete a respective training piece. So this is twofold. This can be implemented in conjunction with what they have in place. I candidly believe that it can replace because it's so comprehensive. But just adding it in that capacity, I think I shouldn't say I think, I'm very confident that once, because I've seen it and I've witnessed it, I'm confident that when the level of engagement increases, then the level of excitement increases, and that all of a sudden enhances your retention, which enhances the bottom line, which makes you that much more productive and cohesive as a respective unit. So I think it's self-rewarding, but it's revolutionary. It's something it's simple, but it's complex.
Well, thank you very much for this impromptu lesson.
Yeah, sure.
So, what we on this talk show, we don't do any scripting at all. Everybody sends me what they're interested to talk about, and then we work it in. So it's sort of organized chaos. And
Yes, sir.
and we do that to keep it spontaneous, keep that level going, and that retains the audience generally. So, Mark, a long time ago, you were on a mission in Northern Ireland and Scotland. And is this, can you relate this cultural thing and this unconscious bias about people from different backgrounds, different religion, different color, different whatever?
Yeah, I learned a lot when I was back. I was actually an expat. I was assigned there for a period of 2 years. I was doing missionary work over there. And for a 19-year-old kid to go to Northern Ireland, I was actually in Northern Ireland for the first year. That was exciting. We seeing tanks go down the street, soldiers with machine guns, rifles, and they're all wanting to check you out and frisk you when you go inside of stores. It was really fun. It was really interesting. But I matured so much in those 2 years, and I learned so much. It kind of formed some of the credos that I live by in my life. And I think we all have to have certain credos to lean on when we get into troubled water or have trials or adversity. And these credos have been especially helpful for me. And you know what they are, Ed. I've talked to you a little bit before, but the first one is the only constant is change. And so embrace it. Because you can't change it. It's come and change has beset you. And so you might as well just embrace it and learn to work with it. When I got Parkinson's, diagnosed with Parkinson's, it was not a happy time for me. It's not a happy day for me. In fact, I didn't deal with it as well as I think I could have. Looking back now, there's things I could have done differently, like embrace it. The second thing is control's an illusion. We think we have control over things, but we really don't. We have choices to make. We have decisions we can make, and then we have to live by those decisions and those choices because we're the ones that made the decision. So it's there. We have no control. When this broadcast ends, Ed, we could all walk out the door and we get hit by an airplane or something that we just can't control. So we have to accept that. My last one I'll share with you is if you think things can't get worse, you're wrong. And that's not to be a pessimist. That's just to say that sometimes it's a slippery slope in life. And if a certain unfortunate events happen sequentially, we could all find ourselves in a cardboard box on the side of the street. So these are lessons that I've learned the hard way, but I'm so thankful that I've learned them. So now they help me in the future when I have challenges in the future.
Well, Mark, you're a true inspiration, frankly. So thank you for being on the program again. Okay, so Andrew, back to you. And how can you, let me ask you, can VR and AR and technology be applied to what Al Dennis is doing?
That was interesting. And I have to say that, first, Mark, you are incredibly wise and absolutely second that inspirational comment. There's so many people that will be defeated by a bad situation, but to not only not be defeated by it, but then turn it into bettering yourself and bettering others. That is, my hat is off to you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But
absolutely.
Yeah, and for what Go Culture's working on, so VR and AR absolutely can help with that. And I think that one of the, I kind of have a bit of an unfair advantage because I've gotten a sneak peek of what their new diversity, equity, inclusion product's going to be, which I will shamelessly plug them for them of that going live Thursday this week. So, I was channeling my inner Ed Cohen, but
Hey, I grew up being a pitchman.
Yeah. If I could be half as good, I'll be happy. But yeah, so part of what they've done with the new model is through storytelling. So storytelling, in my opinion, is one of the most effective ways for us to learn. Realistically, again, I talk a lot about how technology can help people learn, but historically, we learn through storytelling over years, and that around a campfire, being able to share lessons with each other, share myths with each other, share what the constellations are. And part of the benefit of their new upgraded product that's known as global citizenship is so it's purpose built for diversity, equity, inclusion. It was improved upon the already industry changing intercultural training tool. So it was already, decades in development to even get to this point. And now with the storytelling aspect of the immersion. So when we were talking about of how we learn, of how we interact, of how we connect as human beings, an awesome thing about it, and I know that I'm bragging a lot about it, but I'll brag for him. He's modest. So he's
extremely modest.
Yeah. So with that active storytelling, so there is definitely potential to make it into something VR where you're actually sitting across from someone and having a conversation. But the way that they built it is actually as good as you could get without going into a full virtual reality environment, because there are people sharing their stories. And and Dr. Velton, Ed, that I know that you know as well, that he's a brilliant guy, an amazing speaker, and he gives expert testimony on each of the factors. So I know that I was captivated by it when I just saw the first segment, when you sent me over the sneak peek of it, of, hey, what do you think? And I was like, I need to see more. It's because we get drawn into that. And that was actually one of the reasons when we linked up with Jorge when I first started, that so much in mobility and so many of our life experiences come from storytelling. And I got linked with Jorge because actually, Jorge, if I'll let you tell the story. You're better at it than I am.
So, I'm actually originally from Spain. I was born there. Unfortunately, I had to move because of my dad's job. He was actually one of the first Microsoft software engineers. So he had a contract where we would go to different countries and kind of get him introduced into technology, engineering, get him away from pretty much everything that they do with a government contract as far as paperwork going into systems. So, and usually these contracts would last about a year. So I started moving when I was 5, and I lived literally 7 years in 7 countries. So after each year, it was kind of like pack our stuff, go to a different country. And then after that, it eventually, like, my mom kind of was not happy that, I was literally living for a year in a different country and had to move. And she said that, after when I was like 14, she's like, hey, I need you to be at least stable and start kind of thinking about school, college, and all that. So that's how I ended up here in Arkansas. My mom was here. And from there, after going through high school and all that, I went through college, and then I started kind of asking my advice, like, hey, do you guys know anywhere I can get connected with, or anybody around the area that I could kind of reach out to be either a mentor or can guide me somewhere I want to do. And I had an advisor at my community college that linked me up with Andrew. And I from there, like the relationship started, and I was able to get a scholarship to go to Georgetown for international law. So I kind of told him that's kind of what I wanted to do. And then after getting that done, he was like, hey, man, I have an opportunity for you. I was like, perfect, I'm in. And that's kind of how the relationship kind of started. But I think that the most entertaining stuff of moving so much was just kind of being able to kind of dive in and learn about people's culture, how they go about things, languages. And I think most of that had kind of prepared me to where I'm at now, to be able to kind of go through those obstacles that sometimes, life throws at you, and be able to kind of, I like to say, like, dust it off and keep going and keep moving. So it's been interesting. It's been definitely helpful. But I think it's a good setup. And I think, like, I know when I was at Georgetown, we had people that, were doing study abroad. And I was like, man, take advantage of it, because you'd be surprised how much you learn, and you come back, more open-minded about things, and just be able to keep building relationships too. Because that's one thing that, like I tell Andrew, I know that with the VR and everything that we have going on, One of the big things, at least for me internationally, is to be able to kind of bring this concept to not only here in the U.S. but across the pond. For me, like in Spain too, like contacting with cousins, and like, hey, do you guys, how do you guys see this helping you guys develop, or business owners over there, like how can we help you guys develop where it would cut down your costs as far as mobility and be able to kind of add more value to the company as well. So it's been pretty interesting.
Fascinating. Wow. So Olivia, what's next for you next week? What's next week look like?
Well, it depends what day we're talking and what time. So you'd have to give me the details and then I'll let you know.
No, I mean, we're all trying to reinvent ourselves and our products for what I'm calling the new now, which means this new nutty environment that we're trying to do business in. So, so you have a number of deliverables you mentioned.
Yes. So I think the biggest thing is just, for me, not much has changed. I still work from home. I still service my clients the way I typically do. And I think the biggest thing is just providing the value that they need. They don't have a lot of resources. A lot of their resources have been furloughed. There's been reduction in forces, as you can imagine. So they rely on people like myself to help them with their projects on a contract basis. And I think that's kind of the direction where we're headed. In the HR space, there's going to be, I think, more entrepreneurship, more contract work, more freelancing. I think that'll be a more attractive option for companies going forward, simply because it's not a long-term arrangement, right? Companies don't have to provide benefits. They don't have to provide salaries. So when you work with a contractor, you work on either a fixed fee or an hourly fee basis, or value pricing, which I absolutely love. So I think that's the direction that we're headed into. And in fact, I've actually seen some of my own colleagues from my old company become freelancers. So it's quite interesting to see the direction where we're headed. And one thing that I love that Andrew said was storytelling. And storytelling is like the most impactful way of having a conversation with somebody or creating communication. So that's actually one of the strategies that I use in my own communications when I create content for my clients and also content for my own business. That is the best way to engage with people. It's not the corporate jargon that doesn't do anything. It's more about having a connection with somebody and being able to relate to them and having them relate to you. And that's actually a good way to sell as well. For thinking about our own individual businesses, that's a very effective way of doing that.
So you mentioned value pricing. What is that?
Yes. So value pricing is, and I mean, this is my own definition, how I came up with it, but I've seen it in other instances. But for me specifically, value pricing is around what kind of services and value proposition you offer. So there are other freelancers like myself, independent contractors that may work with RMCs or service providers, but we all have different experiences. We all have a different value propositions about what we can bring to the table compared to others. And one of the things that I often like to talk about is USP, which is unique selling proposition. So what is your unique selling proposition as an organization? What do you have that you can provide as a complete unique differentiator than others? And this can be for any business, any product, whether it's for Go Culture, for Vendium Global, for anybody. So very important to nail that down and be strategic in the way you approach business, because there's a lot of people that do what I may do, right? Freelancing, content writing, and they think, what's the differentiator that you bring to my organization? What is it that you can offer that others can't? So again, the storytelling and the value proposition all comes into that.
Thank you very much. Al, tell us, as we come to a close here, let's go around the horn here. Al, tell us a story.
Well,
how did you get to Go Culture?
That's a question. I tell you what, it's almost as if you read my mind. I know this is all about spontaneity, but you did read my mind. Go Culture, I do not believe that I could be in a more powerful or more potent position of influence than to be with Go Culture. We talk about synergy. We talk about business. We're here for a reason. Business 101, synergy. You're looking for 1 + 1 to equal 5. At the same time, 1 + 1 can equal -5. when you've got dissonance. So the key is to increase collaboration, to leverage strengths, and all of that boils down to having a better level of awareness and understanding of your respective peer, or if you're an entity, if you're an organization and your organization collectively has a better understanding of another organization, you're going to have a higher probability of closing. You're going to have a higher conversion rate on a sale. So goal culture organically increases the employee's ability to connect with their peer, and then hence increases both of their respective level of competence, productivity. So it's something that not only is measurable, sustainable, and fact-based and data-driven. I like to say it's not just doing what's right for business. It's doing the right thing. We become better individuals when we learn how to connect. And you asked me to tell a story. I digressed. I mentioned this last night when I was conversing with Andrew. I personally have been involved in, I would say, more than 20 situations where I've seen loss, major loss, and not just loss in terms of dollars, but I've seen, for example, I've worked with a young lady who was a single mom, and I'm a first generation individual, and my father actually attended Georgetown. He was a foreign exchange student from Liberia.
Oh, yes.
Yes, there you go. But without giving out or being too specific, for her sake, she was an extremely hard worker. She had an extremely high level of business acumen, and she had integrity. But simply based on an inability to understand a phrase, her superior, for lack of a better phrase, took it out on her, and they did not connect, and she ended up homeless. We're talking about 2 children. So this is something that actually can prevent tragedy, at the same time increase productivity in business, increase the quality of life for normal citizens like you and I. Not just a professional piece, but this is a do the right thing. Oh, and by the way, you're going to be taken care of. You're going to be compensated for it because it actually makes sense and there's factual. So hopefully I wasn't too vague there, and that made a little bit of sense. But for me, it's I don't know if there would be another place that I could make as large of an impact than being with Go Culture at this particular point in time, especially with cultural trends, our respective climate.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for sharing that. Jorge, thank you very much for your stories and for participating. Nice to meet you. Mark Colo, do you want to sum up here in 30 seconds?
I want to tell a really quick story how we started our foundation. We started about 5 years ago. There's 4 of us who founded it. Each one of us either has a neurological condition or has a family member that has one. In the last 4 years, we haven't taken a dime out of the foundation. We put it all back in to grow it. We started kind of like as 4 of us sitting in my backyard. It was kind of like, how many of you seen the movie Jaws? Raise your hand if you've seen the movie Jaws. Now, we could spend the rest of our time talking about what the best scene of that movie was. But I think they were all great scenes. My favorite scene is toward the end of the movie when the 3 of them are sitting in this dilapidated boat that's about to sink, and this diabolical man-eating shark is circling the boat, and they're in a state of kind of denial. And so what they do is they start to man up. They start drinking a bottle of whiskey, and they get drunk, and then they start comparing scars. All these physical scars. Well, mine's bigger than yours. I got this one that way. And it's kind of like what we were doing. We were talking about who had the biggest emotional scar. In the backyard, talking about who suffered the most. Who got the big granddaddy. And we thought about it. Not all scars are visible. There's scars that people get inside that are unseen.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, what could we do about this? When we got diagnosed, each one of us, it was a rude awakening, and there was no one there to really help us. The doctor said, "This is what you've got. See you later. Have a nice day." And you walk out the hospital thinking, "Oh my gosh, the weight of the world is on my shoulders." It's not a good place to be. But we all agree that what we needed the most that wasn't there was an advocate, somebody who's going to look out for us, help us, be there throughout the duration, and not leave until we say, "Hey, we're good. Thanks for your help." And that's what we focus on. We focus on individuals that are in that boat, ready, about to sink. And we want to be there for them as their advocate. So that's kind of a little bit about how we started the foundation.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate you. Andrew, Bruzzi, it's been a delight. Someday we are going to meet in person.
I look forward to it.
But meanwhile, let's keep this going.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And I appreciate the invite very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Jorge, for tagging along with me as well. And everyone else. It's been such a great conversation. I really appreciate it. And Mark, it was such a pleasure to meet you. Definitely an inspiration. And I'm shamelessly going to steal your kind of anecdote there of the internal scars, because I think that's very impactful. And again, obviously with the storytelling portion, that we all work in some segment of people interactions. I often refer to trying to get to high touch through high tech, and tech so often separates us. So being able to share that and being able to hear your stories was definitely meaningful to me. So I appreciate it.
So one last thing before we go, our time is just about up. So this Friday, which is the 17th at 3:30 Eastern, my very special guest is from the World Bank. And not a banker, but this woman is in charge. She's been there many years, and she's now in charge of the World Bank family practice of taking care of employees and their families, especially during a time of change. Okay, which is of course critical right now. So I was just very quickly. So I'm really honored to have this opportunity, of course, and I want to invite you all to tune in and meet Yvonne. But I was introduced to her about 36 hours ago by a friend of mine who's also been my guest on the talk show in the past from London. And he happens to be head of a European actually a global moving company, but he's in charge of the European business scene. So his name is Andy Elliman. He also climbed Mount Everest and survived. And they had a tragedy happen while on that trip, and some people didn't come back. But more so, there was an earthquake in Nepal that devastated a whole bunch of that area. And ever since then, after they got back, those who did, Andy's been raising money for a Nepal foundation. And one of his chores, his tasks, self-imposed, is to swim the English Channel and achieve that. So that in itself, never mind all the yuck in the water, but he did not know how to swim, period. And he's taught himself with the help of others to learn how to swim. And so currently, because of the virus thing, a previously scheduled swim for this September has been postponed 1 year. So he's working out swimming in the river by Oxford University north of London. And he also has rigged up in his backyard a swimming pool with a machine that he's hooked on. And so he's swimming, and he doesn't go very far, but there's a water circulation. So he says, "Ed, I want to introduce you. You've been so helpful that I want to introduce you to somebody who should meet you and you should meet her. And so that's how I got the introduction just on Monday of this week. All right. And so we had an email conversation yesterday, and she agreed to come right on my talk show. So it's this Friday, and it's going to be about how the World Bank Group, which is, of course, is mega organization, takes care of their people and their families, especially during this time of crisis. And so that's what the show is going to be all about. And I want to invite you all and others to come. So thank you again. It's my honor to host you guys. And I want you to all come back on some other topic, some other time, or join in other shows that we do. And if you have suggestions as to who else we should have or a topic to cover, now, Olivia, I know you're full of ideas, and so I'm going to tap you going forward about what's hot. This value pricing idea is a really interesting idea. So thank you for being our guest. I'll sum up on
Thank you for
Global
having us.
TV.
Absolutely. It's been a
It's
pleasure.
been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
all.
much.
Okay, so Mark's in Southern California, Al's in Texas, Olivia in Toronto area. Jorge, you're in Arkansas?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and Andrew, are you still up in the mountains?
Until next week, yeah, I actually start my journey back on this coming Monday finally. So yeah.
Okay, so this is not self-quarantine, is it?
Well, so a little bit there and not. So it originally started as a visit to family, then meeting with the client. Then we took a trip to Mexico for a bit. Then COVID happened and it was quarantine. And so, yeah, it obviously is not going to get better anytime soon. So I'll go ahead and go back to reality and no longer stay on a vineyard.
All right, keep eating those green beans and stay healthy. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
You guys.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Nice to meet you all. Nice to meet you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, this is Ed signing up from San Diego Global TV
Bye, guys.
on the air.